Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel, YouTube, and welcome to another album of the week. This is episode number 143, and this right here, folks, is the final album of the week episode for 2021, and the album that I picked for this final 2021 yearly episode of album of the week is none other than Take No Prisoners, the fourth studio album from hard southern rockers Molly Hatchet. Now, obviously, I pretty much wanted to at least cover this album, but since there was never really a legitimate day that this was released back in November of 1981, I just decided to just make this the final 2021 album of the week episode. So let me just get right into it, okay? So, at this point in Molly Hatchet's career, they already had plenty of lineup changes. I mean, original singer Danny Joe Brown ended up leaving the band and ended up getting replaced by Jimmy Farrar, right? Yeah, Farrar. Again, rest in peace. He would, of course, come in on debut on their third album, Beating the Odds. And so this is his second and will then end up being his last album with Molly Hatchet. But Jimmy Farrar ain't the only guy that ends up leaving after this album. But we'll get into that afterwards. But this is Take No Prisoners from Molly Hatchet. So, this album was recorded at Compass Point Studios in Nassau, Bahamas. And of course, then also recorded at the Plant Studios in Los Angeles, California. So this was recorded at two studios in two different locations. And it was, of course, produced by none other than Tom Werman. And eventually ends up getting released through Epic Records on November of 1981. And it's already reached its 40th anniversary. So there we go. Alright, so what do Molly Hatchet have to offer on Take No Prisoners? So let's look at the track listing here. We have at least about 10 songs here, and it all clocks in at 35 minutes and 20 seconds. I think it's perfect enough time length for a southern rock album anyways, especially of the hard rock variety. So let's get into it. Let's get into naming down these 10 songs. So it begins with Bloody Reunion, then into Respect Me in the Morning, a cover of Little Richard's Long Tall Sally, then into Loss of Control, All Mine, Lady Luck, Power Play, Don't Mess Around, Don't Leave Me Lonely, and then finally ending with Dead Giveaway. So there's your 10 songs. Now, I've spent plenty of years so far listening to this album. I mean, I got into Molly Hatchet and really early in the 2010s because of the Guitar Hero World Tour video game had a song called Flirting with Disaster, which was my introduction to Molly Hatchet, and then of course obtaining some 3-disc compilation. I think what is it, Guitar Monsters, that my parents had picked up at Costco like maybe a year or two later, and one of the discs contained their Allman Brothers Band cover track, which is Dreams I'll Never See. So that would be the second song I actually had heard from Molly Hatchet, and that would end up being the first time I ever heard from Molly Hatchet. But back in 2015, I decided to suggest the two Molly Hatchet sets, which was one from Epic and one from SPV, to my parents again, to maybe get me for Christmas, and they ended up getting me those two sets for Christmas. So I had 10 Molly Hatchet CDs to listen to, and one of my favorite ones out of the bunch of at least of the really early period of them on Epic before the whole I guess some people consider the odd period for Molly Hatchet in the 1990s when they were with SPV Steamhammer, where they actually went even more heavier and went in more of a metal direction, at least style-wise, even though still being or at least somewhat truthful and respectful to at least the southern rock roots. It just was a lot more of a metal edge to those 90s albums. and early mid 2000s. But of the, at least of the really early period that they were on Epic in the 1980s, Take No Prisoners was one of the ones I really latched onto. This was really one of my personal favorites of those, and I think the reason that it just completely took me by this album is that this one really, compared to some of the previous three, might have been the more straightforward hard rock album I think Molly Hatchet had released, because of, while there's still a bit of that sort of, almost Lynyrd Skynyrd sort of flavor going on in their sound, it's still southern rock, but there's a lot more of a harder rock edge where you can tell they were definitely paying attention to a lot of the British heavy bands that were out at the time, like, for example, Saxon and early Def Leppard, Tigers of Pantang, even at times Michael Schenker Group, AC/DC, who are Australian, but they kind of fit in that category. And Whitesnake and some of these bands, they, just like Blackfoot, they really paid attention to these bands and really wanted to kind of really make their sound at least a little more modern for the early 1980s, something that would really at times appeal to the more headbangers in at least Britain, and that were into a lot of the new wave or British heavy metal movement. I think Molly Hatchet, with guys I hear like Dave Hublack and those guys here, I think they definitely wanted to really appeal to that audience, and they did, I think, the best way they could, because this does some songs, especially for example like Bloody Reunion, Loss of Control, All Mine, and Don't Mess Around, and Don't Leave Me Lonely, and Dead Giveaway. At least parts of Dead Giveaway. Even though Dead Giveaway does come across a lot more like the more classic southern rock Molly Hatchet sound that they established on the first two albums with Danny Joe Brown on vocals. But again, when you got songs again like Bloody Reunion, Loss of Control, and Don't Mess Around, you could tell there's a little bit of a heaviness going on. They're definitely more metallicing it up a bit. It's a little more metal at times. At least by nowadays standards, it's more typical sort of hard rock or classic rock. But at this period, you can, to any sort of British headbanger, or even early in America that were into, let's say, also other bands like Y&T and Riot and The Rods, and some of the early Twisted Sister, maybe, at least a year later, but still ones that were in New York and whatnot that were picking up this album. They definitely, they could tell that they were starting to kind of really heavy up a little bit of their sound, especially with at least Loss of Control, which comes across almost more like a Michael Schenker Group or a UFO or Scorpion style rocker. It just, it sounds less southern and more British. It's really interesting, and it's different because of, again, Molly Hatchet, again, they always get synonymous with at least a southern rock crowd. Again, with like Lynyrd Skynyrd, but a song like Loss of Control just comes across more British. It's a more of a new wave or British heavy metal influence on this song. And it just really comes off very fiery. There's a lot of great guitar solos. Definitely probably one of the heaviest songs off the album. It's really, I just dig it. It's one of my personal favorites off of here. All Mine at times might take some influence from like Whitesnake and AC/DC and whatnot, where it's got more of a bluesy flavor going on to it, but still it's heavy. It's still straight up just a hard rock, but again, it just comes from these guys. And since I've been so familiar with some of their work, they're definitely more of a southern rock band, but some of the shit on this album is just a lot more British sounding. It's still southern, but you can tell they're mixing in more, like, again, the Saxons and whatnot into their sound, and it just comes across just very less southern and more just straight up British rock. It's really interesting what they did with here. They really were trying to really appeal to at least the British metal crowd. And again, maybe trying to get onto, the Monsters of Rock and all of that, which Molly Hatchet never got to at least to play the Monsters of Rock festivals, even though their sound at this time period would have fit perfectly with those kind of bands. They really were trying to appeal to that crowd, and it's definitely heard there. But besides that, there's still plenty of songs that still come across as classic. Southern rock. I mean, Respect Me in the Morning is still straight up a nice hard rocker. But the interesting thing about this song is that it features guest vocals from Mother's Finest, Joyce Baby Jean Kennedy. And she's got a nice voice. It works, suits well for it. It definitely gives it more of that commercial appeal. You can tell they're still trying to at least appeal to a lot of the more radio stations. But still, it's got a nice hook to it. I dig the song, though it's not my personal favorite. But I think, again, there's a lot in this song that I really appreciate. So it's fine there. Again, their cover of Long Tall Sally is really interesting. I might have said Tong. It's Long Tall. Anyways, it's a fine cover. Kind of starts off a little bit slow, which is interesting that they slowed it down a little bit, which gives it more of a bluesier flavor. But as the song progresses, they eventually go into fast. It's like they might have took inspiration from what Aerosmith did with their cover of Train Kept a Rollin'. And I think they kind of did something similar in terms of the concept for Long Tall Sally, because of, again, it starts out slow, but as the song keeps going, when it gets to at least those final parts, it goes back into the original speed of the original version. And it's really interesting what they did. I mean, it's different, but I have no problem with it. Normally, some of these cover songs, especially like this one, should be the weakest point on this album, but I think it's actually one of the more finer points. It actually, if anything, it makes this first half of Take No Prisoners the more straight up hard rock, at least variety of the first half. It just makes it full on hard rock. It's interesting, it's more rock, and it's more energetic. And I dig that. The second half is definitely a little bit at times more on, just a little bit more diverse a bit. I mean, again, with songs like Lady Luck and Power Play, these two songs come off a little bit different. Lady Luck is, again, kind of a similar concept with like Respect Me in the Morning, where they're really trying to appeal to a lot of the more radio stations, trying to get more radio appeal. Because this one, it's like, wow, it's still straight up rock. More at times, maybe pushing a little bit to hard rock, but it still has a classic Molly Hatchet Southern rock sound. They're experimenting with this track because of there's even they always had pianos in their songs. You know, it's a classic Southern rock tradition. They have piano. I mean, Leonard Skinner is one that always comes to mind. But this one, it's a little interesting because they're adding in a bit of like a horn section into this song, and you can tell they're really trying to appease to at least the radio stations. It's different, and it shows that Molly Hatchet even were just broadening their sound a little bit more. It's like, wow, there's definitely had a goal and really to have a sound that would at least somewhat appeal to the British headbangers. But songs like Lady Luck still show that they're trying to also appeal at the same time to a lot of the radio stations. Maybe to get some more radio play, make some more big hits. That's what Lady Luck is. But it's got a nice hook to it, and it's good, and I have no problem with it. Power Play is definitely at times more of the Lynyrd Skynyrd flavor. This one's more Southern rock, though it has still a bit of a nice, very bluesy feel to it as well. At times reminds me a little bit of some of the more commercial songs from, especially the late 70s period of Blue Oyster Cult at times. Again, Tom Werman produced. For example, Mirrors. But there's a little bit of at times where still that sort of classic Lynyrd Skynyrd feel. It's really interesting that I'm making comparisons, not just to, of course, again, the contemporary Southern rock bands like Lynyrd Skynyrd, but I'm also at times with this track making some very interesting comparisons to Blue Oyster Cult. Again, it's different, but that's the kind of what I'm getting from the song, and it's different. But again, it just keeps the variety going with the album. Again, right from there, it's onto two of the more hard rockers, and are fine, especially Don't Mess Around, which is my personal favorite of the second half here. Dead Giveaway is straight up classic Molly Hatchet. It wouldn't sound out of place, out of like, for example, Beating the Odds, or even Flirting with Disaster, or even the self-titled debut. So it's still straight up classic Molly Hatchet Southern rock, just again of the hard rock variety. So there we go. There's just plenty of great songs on this album. I think it's definitely one of the more underrated albums from Molly Hatchet. I think it's definitely a great album from these guys, and it's a personal favorite. So there we go. After this, again, this would be they would, of course, would tour for the sound. They would play shows for the sound, but after those shows, I think were done, Jimmy Farrar would leave the band, and so does founding member and bass player Banner Thomas. Both these two would leave the band. Again, it's very shocking that one of the founding members would leave the band. Again, Banner Thomas was there since the beginning. Again, he was a founding member, like I've stated, and he was pretty much there from the first album to Flirt with Disaster and to Beating the Odds, and this would be his final album. And he would not rejoin the band ever again. This would be it for him. And sadly, Banner Thomas would pass away in Savannah, Georgia on April 10th of 2017. And same thing also goes for Jimmy Farrar, who would then end up passing away on October 29th of 2018. So it's really sad. Again, Molly Hatchet has lost a lot of members, including, of course, one of the heart and soul at times of Molly Hatchet was Dave Hubeck, who would end up again sadly passing away, and a lot of other guys in this band would. And the kind of name off would be ridiculous, but for this video, I think right now, since this was the final album for Jimmy Farrar, it's I think more appropriate to also mention when he had passed away and whatnot. Same thing for Banner Thomas. So it's just sad. But again, that was the lifestyle a lot of these Southern rockers took. It took a toll on them. It came with a price, and that's what ended up happening. That became the fate for these guys. So it's really sad, but still, what they created with this album, I think, was one of the more finer albums from Molly Hatchet. I really consider this one of my personal favorites. So there we go. Again, it's already reached its 40th anniversary. If you have any memories of Take No Prisoners, you can leave them in the comments section below. Whether it be positive or negative, you can leave them there. But if you've never heard Take No Prisoners by Molly Hatchet, and you want to get at least a feel of the Jimmy Farrar era of Molly Hatchet, which only lasted for 2 albums, I would say this definitely should be the first one, even though Beating the Odds is a good album too, but this to me is my personal favorite, so I think it's definitely worthy of listening to. It's a good album, so there we go. I hope all of you enjoyed. This is the very last Album of the Week episode of 2021, so with that, I hope all of you have a great New Year's, and I'll see you in the year 2022. I can't wait to see you all in that year, so with that, have a happy new year. Looking forward to 2022. This is Every Thrasher saying I'm out. I'll see you all later. Take care.